Al-Sunnah wal-Jama'ah is the theological and practical tradition that is based on the Sunnah of the Prophet, peace be upon him, the understanding of the religion held by the companions and the majority of the Ummah, and represents the historical mainstream of Islam. Al-Sunnah is one of the most common concepts in the Islamic world today. The vast majority of Muslims define themselves within this tradition. So, what is it? Is al-Sunnah a sect, a belief system, or something larger, more historical, and deeper than that? Giving a single definition to this question would be narrowing the issue, because from the moment it first emerged, al-Sunnah took shape not just as a set of doctrines, but as a broad mainstream filtered through historical experience. The issue at the beginning was this: when the Islamic society was faced with rapid expansion and successive political ruptures, how would unity be preserved? Where would the main body of the Ummah stand among different interpretations, different political positions, and different religious understandings? Al-Sunnah is the crystallized version of the answers given to these very questions over time. Therefore, seeing it merely as a sect remains insufficient. It contains theological interpretations, schools of jurisprudence, fiqh, a historical memory, and perhaps most importantly, a claim to a common ground that relies on the majority experience of the Ummah. Al-Sunnah is a framework that describes not just what is believed, but how to live together. In this respect, it is a social center as much as it is a belief system. It is the name of a historical reflex that prioritizes balance rather than extremes, continuity rather than ruptures, and equilibrium rather than absolutism. Therefore, understanding Al-Sunnah is not just learning the views of a sect. It is understanding how the main body that emerged during the breaking points of Islamic history preserved itself. In the early years of Islamic history, Muslims entered a rupture they had never encountered before. The process that began with the assassination of Uthman shook not only political balances, but the entire mental and social map of society. On one side was Ali, on the other was Muawiyah. Both sides were Muslim. Both sides believed in the Quran, and the most critical point was that both sides saw themselves as righteous. But they were no longer on the same side. At Jamal and Siffin, people who turned toward the same Qibla were now standing against each other. The Islamic society was facing its first major fitnah. So, what did ordinary Muslims do in this environment? History mostly tells of those who fought, commanders, leaders, and great political actors. But the truly great story often remains outside that scene, the silent majority. As far as we can understand, from the lines of the sources, the vast majority of Muslims neither declared Ali as an infidel, takfir, nor pushed Muawiyah outside of Islam. They were not looking for a rupture between the two extremes, but for a path of righteousness. In the middle of the fitnah, without completely losing the main body and without attaching absolute sanctity or absolute exclusion to the sides, they tried to stand firm, not turning political disputes into a direct crisis of faith, not easily declaring Muslims as infidels, protecting the unity of the community, and preserving the common heritage from the Prophet. This attitude was not a sectarian claim or a systematic doctrine. It was a strong social equilibrium reflex that emerged spontaneously in moments of crisis. In those days, no one stood up and said, "I am Al-Sunnah," to step in front of society, because there was not yet an Al-Sunnah with a given name and drawn boundaries. However, the vast majority of society was meeting at an invisible but decisive common direction. The Islamic world quickly crossed the borders of Arabia, reaching Syria, Egypt, Iran, and Central Asia. New cities were conquered, new societies were included in Islam, and new cultures became part of this vast world. But a critical thing happened here. Not only did the lands change, but minds also began to change. To put it more accurately, new questions entered the Islamic world because the conquered regions were not empty spaces. Iran, with its own intellectual heritage, Byzantium, with its theological debates, and the Indian and Central Asian worlds, with their philosophical accumulations, were included in this new structure. The questions of the old world were carried into the center of the new world, and these questions deepened over time. How should God's attributes be understood? Was man free, or was he surrounded by destiny? Where was the boundary between reason and revelation? What was the legitimacy of political authority based on? These were no longer abstract discussions of study circles. They were real problems of a growing civilization. By the 3rd Hijri century, the Islamic world had entered an extraordinary period of intellectual activity. Fiqh schools were forming. Theological, kalam debates were deepening, and hadith movements were gaining strength. Every region was producing its own scientific climate. Kufa was dealing with one question. Basra was in the middle of another debate. Damascus was carrying a different political memory, and Khorasan was producing a completely different intellectual atmosphere. The Islamic civilization was growing, but at the same time, it was transforming into a fragmented structure. Right at this point, an invisible but decisive need emerged: the protection of the main body. In an environment where so many different ideas, cultures, and interpretations existed under the same roof, the fundamental question was, how would the common ground be protected? The al-Sunnah line gained meaning precisely from this historical necessity. This tradition was concerned not only with producing new ideas, but also with preventing disintegration. It was concerned not only with responding to debates, but with protecting the common memory of the Ummah. Protecting the main body against ideas coming from different regions, establishing balance without drifting into extremes in the face of new questions, and not losing a common framework while diversity grows. This is why al-Sunnah was not a system born from a single center, but a protective reflex formed in the different scientific basins of a vast civilization. It took shape in Baghdad with one form, in Kufa with another style, and in Khorasan with another sensitivity, but with the same goal: to protect the main body. Perhaps this is why al-Sunnah should be read not as a mere theological system, but as a common ground of adhesion that a civilization developed against the possibility of disintegration. Ultimately, this whole historical picture leads us to a single concept: Sawad al-Azam, the great majority, meaning the main body, the great majority, the common direction. This consciousness that emerged during the First Fitnah periods eventually stopped being just a sociological expression of the majority and turned into an idea of orthodoxy. That is, the idea that truth can be protected not only in the extremes, but also in the continuity of the mainstream within Islamic thought became established. In this sense, al-Sunnah became the historical name of this mainstream, not a claim. It was neither a system founded by a single person, nor a product of a single center. On the contrary, it represented a broad orthodoxy that arose from the communalization of answers given to different problems in different geographies over time. This stance, made itself visible, especially during periods of crisis. This reflex to protect the main body, which began with the First Fitnah experiences, was reproduced later during the great transformations of the Islamic world. The unification of different ethnic and cultural elements under the same roof of civilization during the Abbasid period, the institutionalization of the search for political stability with the Seljuks, and the systematization of the scientific tradition with structures like the Nizamiya madrasas can be read within the historical continuity of this main line. The Ottoman experience emerged as one of the most long-lived political forms of this line. Being able to keep different religious and ethnic elements within the same political structure in a very wide geography was not just a military or administrative success, but also a version of this logic of protecting the main body. The existence of fiqh schools, the madrasa system, the judiciary organization, and the class of scholars, ilmiye, in the Ottoman Empire ensured that the al-Sunnah line turned into a regulatory framework at the state level. In every period when differences increased, this line asked the same question again: how to stay together without disintegrating. The line stretching from the Abbasids to the Seljuks and from there to the Ottomans can be read not only as a change of political powers, but also as an effort to keep differences within a common ground of legitimacy before they turn into uncontrolled disintegration. And within all this historical continuity, al-Sunnah becomes the name of the way Islamic civilization carries its own plurality and the reflex to protect the main body rather than being a period name or a sum of sects.